This week's episode is brought to you by the El Dorado Film Festival. The El Dorado Film Festival is entering its 6th year, and their goal is to bring quality local and international films to their audience, as well as encourage the engagement between patrons and filmmakers through multiple Q&A sessions, panels, workshops, and don't forget those epic parties. Having participated in the festival for every year since its inception, this is by far one of my favorite events to attend every single year. The event is October 10th and 12th in El Dorado, Arkansas at the South Arkansas Arts Center. Tickets can be purchased by visiting their website, eldofilmfest.com. That's eldofilmfest.com, and look for the ticket link. Can't wait to see you there. Would you be interested in some weekly inspirations and insights into this wildly weird and mystical world of creatives I dive into onto a regular basis? I send out a short email every week for your Sunday evening reading pleasure. The short email includes strange interviews I come across, articles I discover while researching podcast guests, and tools and tricks I discover in my own creative process, and much, much more. Let me tickle your cerebrum with a fun read to start off your week. Just visit barrow.blog/inspire. So I thought I'd dial back the clock on this week with this special episode because we are at the 3-year anniversary when I had the ludicrously amazing luck to interview one of my favorite artists, Joey Lauren Adams. Joey is an actor, writer, director, and she is also an Arkansas native, born in Little Rock. You've likely seen her in some of her well-known films, including Dazed and Confused, Big Daddy, and let us not forget her Golden Globe-nominated performance in one of my favorite films, Chasing Amy, directed by Kevin Smith. In fact, her next feature is Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, which will have a 2-day nationwide release in October, followed by a roadshow hosted by Mr. Smith himself. Now back to Joey. In this interview, we discuss how art has affected her life, what drives her as a storyteller, and how life is not always about fulfilling your dreams. However, if you are one of the lucky ones out there that actually does achieve this feat, you better have another dream on cue ready for the next challenge. For Joey, that seems to be her more recent dive into writing, producing, and directing. We do discuss some of her process, and I was able to squeak out a couple of good stories from her past as well. So, without further ado, enjoy this week's episode of Creatively.
Gets really quiet and leaves the room. First of all, thanks for taking a little bit of time out to do this. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I was real excited when I talked to Ryan and he said that you were going to be able to come down for the film festival, and your name and your kind of appearance here means so much, I think, to so many people.
It's so hard for me to even imagine that.
Well, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. You know. And I'm sure it's kind of a weird thing to have to deal with.
Right.
I don't know.
The way I look at it is because of growing up in North Little Rock, Arkansas, and I wanted to be an actress. And, you know, you don't meet a lot of actresses growing up in North Little Rock. And so I used to sit in front of Mary Steenburgen's house because it was just someone that, like, my granddad taught her Sunday school. And it made it real for me and seem possible. Like, if she did it, maybe I can. And so I just try and think of it like that. Like, I mean, the world's changed so much because when I was growing up, there was no internet. Like, you know, if Jennifer Aniston was wearing a pair of jeans, you couldn't get them. Yeah. You know, where now you can have them.
They weren't immediately available for download while you were watching the video.
No, they weren't. Exactly. So, you know what I mean? Hollywood seemed so, like, you know, I'd never heard of Variety magazine, but now kids know about Variety. They know about independent film. You know, it's just the world's changed. But so I'm sure people don't need me to like say like, yeah, you can do this. You know, like.
Well, I mean, that's interesting that you bring that up, and we've had that conversation before. I think where we talked about, I think part of, especially, rural areas or small town areas or even middle America kind of in general, if you're not exposed to a certain idea or at least have a ability to see a path, no matter what the profession is, it's really hard to find a way into it, no matter how big the desire is. And so you were able to kind of find that path through kind of seeing what she did because of her being a local.
Yeah, and someone, again, that like my family knew. Like my mom knew her, my aunt knew her.
Right.
And what was weird though is like there were no, like it never occurred to me to be a director because you never heard of female directors. The only was like Barbara Streisand directed a film, but that just seemed like such an anomaly. She's a singer and an actress and she did this. It wasn't. I guess she didn't feel like that was her only, like, I'm a female director and that's what I do. It was just kind of like she's famous and she got to do that and wanted to do it. And
so then what was it in you that drew out that idea that you needed to tell a story in a different manner?
I told this story last night, but people listening to the podcast may not have been there. But long story short, I just realized that, like, as an actress, I was so dependent on Hollywood. Like, you're sitting there waiting. There's nothing proactive about it. You're waiting for an audition to come your way or a script to come you're waiting for your phone to ring instead of kind of making the calls yourself. And you can't wake up and say, I want to act today. It's not up to you. And so I found myself, I think, getting frustrated, and I guess idle hands. You fall into destructive behavior and that sort of thing. And I just had a night out in a bar on a Tuesday night and just realized I was there because should I tell the horticulturalist story?
No, go for it. It's funny. It's hilarious.
Well, there were these two young horticulturalists.
I
have, but who had gotten into this. We were at the Standard in Hollywood, and it was the place to be on a Tuesday night. And these two young horticulturalists got in somehow, and they recognized me, and I invited them to have drinks with us. And then the bar was closing, and we were going to continue the party at my friend Jason's. And I invited these kids, and they said, "But it's 2." And I said, "It's 2 what?" And they're like, "It's 2 a.m. What's the special occasion?" And it was just one of those moments where I realized, like, this is how it happens. Like, you're out in a bar on a Tuesday night getting wasted because you have nothing to do the next day. And as a creative person, I think it's frustrating to wake up sober and feeling great and not have an outlet for your creativity. So it's easier to wake up hungover. And
so what was that's an awakening moment, right? And I think that all of us have had experiences of awakening moments in our lives. But what was the first step for you? Like, what was the next movement?
I got up and I think I went and got, like, I didn't have before computers. Like, I got a typewriter that was kind of half a computer.
Yeah, the word processors.
Yeah. I got one of those and just started writing. And I knew.
Did you have an intention? Do you have an idea? Or was it something you've been working on? Or was it just, gotta start?
I just got to start doing something. And I knew write what you know. And also, again, like, I hadn't grown up with knowing female writers, or screenplay writers. I'm sure they existed, but, I wasn't exposed to them. And so that was intimidating, I think, as well, of, like, who are you to think you can write? But so I didn't write with any sort of intentions other than I just need something to do with my days where I can feel creative.
Did you immediately go to a screenplay, or was it just a write?
I did, yeah. Okay. And then I just thought, like, what's a role that I would love to play? What's a female character? Because, as an actress, it's obviously frustrating. I've played a lot of girlfriend roles. And even when you are the lead female, it tends to be written by a male. And they don't, they're not complicated. You're either the uptight bitch or you're the good girl next door. There's not a lot of, like, well, she's kind of a bitch, but she's also the good girl next door. There's not a lot of complexity in the roles. I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but like, I just love Deborah Winger in Urban Cowboy. Like, that's one of my favorite movies. And so I just started writing about, kind of like if I hadn't left Arkansas, what would my life have been?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you so kind of is role playing a manner for you to kind of find an insight?
No, I just knew, like, again, write what you know, and it's just sort of, I'm gonna segue a little bit, but like when I did first get to LA, and I think no matter where you are growing up, like in your 20s, you're trying to find your identity. And like I hated the South so much growing up. Like I used to run away. I was an exchange student to Australia. I couldn't wait to leave, and just because I knew there was more out there. Like I met this woman in a jewelry store, and she was a rep for a jewelry designer, and they paid her like $200,000 a year to travel to Italy to sell jewelry. And I was like, wait, they pay you to go to Italy?
Yeah.
A lot of money, and you have an expense account. And her name was Retta Wolf, and she was just this fabulous woman. And I was just like, what else is there out there that you can do that I don't even know about? And so I always I had pictures of Paris on my wall and New York, and I just always wanted to go. And I think in order to, in my case, like my roots were so strong in the South. Like my grandparents all lived, walking distance, and cousins and your family and my friends, we were in, Mother's Day out in the church in cribs together. Like we don't remember when we met each other. And those are just such deep roots. And in order to sever those, I think you have to develop some sort of hatred for it. You have to talk yourself into it.
I which is funny because I had a very similar upbringing, being in a small town and growing up in the South, and I'm being able to walk down the street or get on my bike, go to my grandparents' house, but I felt very much the same way.
Right.
Like I didn't at an earlier age, I was able to go some places and get exposed to different things to know enough that there's this bigger world out there.
Yeah.
So when I was done with high school, it was how quickly can I get out? And by the way, I'm never, ever, ever coming back, which is something I found out you should never say because here we are.
I know. It's crazy. So I kind of, I guess you so to speak, you cut those ties. And when I did get to California, I was embarrassed that I was from Arkansas.
Were you?
Yeah. Because a lot of people were like, where is that?
Yeah.
What state is that in? Or it was Bill Clinton jokes, and like I remember I got my first job. I moved to San Diego first, and my first job was as a seating hostess. And I showed up, and I had this dress that was like floral pastel fabric that was like a tight sort of bodice, and then 3 tiers of fabric and white pumps, and I had twist beads that you would pick the strand of bead to match.
You were fresh off
big
the
hair, and I'm like, table for two? And they're like, what? Do you need a table for two?
You just hopped off the wagon.
Yeah, and and all the other like the waitresses, and I was just the seating hostess, and the waitresses were like from Sonoma, and these like really cool chicks. And finally, a girl, a waitress there, pulled me aside and was like, we need to go shopping. And so, there's just that, like, I wanted to fit in so bad, and I didn't know how. And so then I tried to, like, okay, I'm an LA person. I moved to LA, and then it was like, I'm going to wear, like, the ripped up jeans and the cross and the leather belt. And you're at that age anyway, you're searching for your identity. Like, who are you? Who are you? And in LA, it's even harder because there's so many people, and there's so, like, you think all these people are so much cooler than you are. You learn that they're not. And, but at the time, it's just, I couldn't find who I was. And so at a certain point, I decided I'm going to be Southern. And I
embraced it.
Yeah, too much. Like I had a bumper sticker on my refrigerator that said "Clean up the South, buy a Yankee a bus ticket." And it was just like everything.
You went to the extreme.
I did, and it was like cowboy boots and the belt buckle, but I knew it, and I was comfortable in it, and it was great because it's like I got really into, like, my dad had listened to blues and country growing up, but I got really into it and still love that music and still love that part of myself, and I eventually evened out, I think. But
so was part of that kind of acceptance or transition, was that also about the time you started writing, or was that a separate?
No, that was before. And so then I started to where, like, I would come home, and and then it's like the things that just seemed normal growing up, like my grandparents' relationship and the things they would say to each other, and that they drank wine out of a box, like things like that I didn't notice growing up. When I started going back home to visit, I started being like, this is interesting. I can see it now. I have some perspective, and I could appreciate the things that were Southern, and there's obviously some things that are Southern that I'm not proud of, that I don't appreciate, but just the community and the family and those funny country sayings, and I just had a deeper appreciation for my family, for the South, the sense of home, and then also just watching sort of, what was happening with my family personally, and my parents getting divorced, and then I had heard this verse because I grew up in the church, and we were there Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and I remember the first time I went from Sunday school to the big church to get to hear the Sunday sermon. And the sermon was on the sin of the father being passed down for 7 generations. And it was just the wrong sermon to hear coming from Sunday school, where it's like God is love and Jesus and little lambs. And it's like, wait, he's like passing down like a sin to innocent children for 7 generations. Like, who is this God, you know? And I made my mom schedule an appointment with the preacher, because I didn't understand. It didn't make sense to me, and he couldn't.
Wait, how old were you?
I don't know.
Because I was young. That's a very kind of adult thing to do, to question, to have listened at that level, but then to think, well, I need to actually get more information on this and question. That's a very adult decision.
But if you're sitting in a Southern Baptist church on a Sunday and the preacher's preaching, and the sin of the father will be passed down, for generations upon his kids and upon his kids. And then I'm thinking, like, what sin does my family have in our background? Yeah. And what's going to be passed down to me? I was terrified.
Yeah.
And so, I went, and, he didn't really have a good explanation for me. And so it just stuck with me. And so when I did sit down to finally write, that had I had gotten to a point where I realized, because as I got older and more interested in my family, and certain things happened, that were tragedies in my family, and I was able to look and understand more, I guess, from an adult's point of view of, why my grandfather did certain things he did, and sort of see that, like, it is passed down. Like, it's an energy. It's, you hear, like, if you beat your kid will probably beat their kid. And it doesn't make sense, because you would think if you were
learn that lesson. But it's true.
Yeah, it's true. And so I realized, like, it's not God in heaven, like, with this beard pointing a finger. It's just an energy that exists. And especially if you're not, like, I kind of came to a place, because also when I moved to, this is so long-winded, and I'm rambling.
It's great.
But when I did move to California and met, like, a Buddhist and Jewish people, and was like, they're going to hell.
Was that your first experience with kind of other kind of religious cultures?
Pretty much. I mean, I'm sure. But I remember even being in California and someone saying, like, someone's name, and then someone saying, oh, well, they're Jewish. And I was like, how do you know? And it's like, well, the name. I'm like, what do you mean the name?
That was new.
We had some Jews for Jesus in our church, but, like, I don't know that there was a synagogue in North Little Rock, and so I just started meeting different people, and I was just like, it can't be that, like, all these people are going to hell.
This doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and so I just sort of then, but I didn't want to, like, obviously, spirituality is such a part of who I am, so I just kind of had to find my own, I guess, definition of it. And to me, it kind of, in a nutshell, became like, God exists in the truth. That's kind of it, and it's like doing to others as you would have them doing to you. And if you can kind of live on those two things.
It's funny, because I know, like, you talked about some of the things that you wanted, that you're not as proud of about the South. And I recall one incident from my childhood when I was with a couple of friends of mine, and they had a play they put on here at a church, and it was called Heaven's Gates and Hell's Furies. And one of my friends' parents were Buddhist, and he had been Buddhist. He'd gone to a Christian church, and at that particular moment, he was Mormon. Primarily, I think, because he was really interested in this girl who was also Mormon, so he had to become Mormon.
Right.
But that's neither here nor there. And then I grew up as an Episcopalian, which is a very kind of open religion. So me and my two other guy friends went to this this play, and we were theater people, and I think that had to be like I don't know why we went, but like that had to have been the reason.
Right. Well, how can you resist?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere, so there's a play coming to town, so we got to go see it. And so I remember going and sitting there, and there were just like a couple of questionable choices of like who was walking through heaven's gates or who was walking through hell's door.
Right.
And I think the one that finally got me, I want to say it was, there was a scene where a father and son had gone fishing on a Sunday instead of going to church with the mother and the daughter. And they drowned and went to hell.
Right.
And I just remember being like, you know what? Fuck this.
Yeah.
I am out the door.
Yeah.
You know, like I just couldn't handle it anymore.
No, I know.
And I remember us sitting, we sat in the car for probably 4 hours in the parking lot, just like, it doesn't make sense, you know? And but we're 16 years old, and the same thing, you know, you get a little older, you start to get exposed to more things, you realize this can't be reality.
Right. And then, again, like, I appreciate that for some people it is.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like, I respect, and I think it's important that, you know, there are diverse opinions in society. But for me, you know, obviously I have friends that are gay. I have, you know, I just didn't want to live in a world where my gay friends go into hell. I don't want to live in that world. And so I just sort of started, you know, it becomes about semantics. And so, you know, if you read the Quran and it's just wording. And it's like, if you look at the Ten Commandments and if you look at the Bible as enlightened writing, you're supposed to grow with it. You know, like as you grow, it's supposed to take on deeper meaning. And so thou shalt not lie is more than just like, don't lie to your mom that you stole that grape from the grocery store. It's like, don't lie to yourself. Don't, you know, it becomes like, it can take on deeper meanings. And so I just don't take the Bible so, you know,
literally on its face,
exactly,
one-to-one.
Exactly. Like if you look at it as enlightened writing, it's a great read, you know? And so this all sort of came to play when I started writing. And so I wanted to write about that verse. I wanted to write about the sin of a father being passed on for generations. I wanted to explore truth and where does God exist for me personally. And like I said, for me, it's living in the truth. And so I think that, like, if you do come from that 7 generations, I do think that you can, you know, get rid of it. You know,
you can cleanse in some way.
Yeah, and but you have to like look at things truthfully. And so I had to, the relationship I had with my father, I had to look at it truthfully, which is hard to do. That's why people go to therapy. And
that's why modern therapy is still around.
Yeah. And so it was really interesting when I started writing because, you know, although I, you know, was wanting to do, I had all these lofty goals, like it's not easy. So I was writing the character that was, again, and the script's loosely based. Like it didn't happen exactly. But I wrote a character based on my father, and then there comes the scene where she kind of confronts him, and I spent probably a month like working on the monologue that this character would give, that my dad would give, and it was like everything I'd ever want, because my dad was like a super quiet person who never talked, and so it was just what I want, you know.
What you want to hear?
Yeah, what I wanted to hear. So it was just like, you know, and I would be crying and weeping, and him explaining, and and I just kept writing it, and it was never working. It wasn't working. And then I finally realized, like, I had created this character who doesn't talk. And as a writer, you can't all of a sudden have a character talk, give this huge monologue, you know, unless it's Chasing Amy and it's Kevin Smith. But, you know, in real life, you know what I mean? So it helped me see my father as an individual and kind of separate my emotion from it and realize that my dad is never going to sit down with me and have this talk, and you need to let it go.
But did the process give you some sort of catharsis in the idea that he wants to express those things. I mean,
sure.
where you're obviously getting this idea or this thought from this monologue.
Yeah.
That's coming at you in some way, but he's expressing it in the way that he can do.
Right. And my dad played guitar, and the thing was, is like, it wasn't, I mean, that's what I think kind of messed me up with my father, is that like he was super emotional, just crippled. And so you could, like, you would around him and you could feel it, just like, and I just wanted to hug him and say, it's, you know what I mean, and just let it out, but it just was not going to happen. And, you know, and also realizing, you know, there were some aspects where he wasn't a great father, but we all, you know, everyone's got their problems. Like, it's, again, it's just looking at it truthfully of, here's where he was a good father, here's where he wasn't a good father, and now move on with your life.
Sure.
And get past it and start dating healthy men and not emotional cripples, you know? Stop trying to heal people and fix people, and just kind of let them live in their truth and you live in your truth. And so, you know, and then I got to throw in like my grandparents and the things that they say to each other. And just kind of, and again, like that was sort of in my 30s where I was personally like searching and very philosophical and trying to find, make sense of life. And growth is so arduous and slow. And, you see these movies, and they're great movies where everything ends up happily ever after. And I love those movies. Like there's days I want to watch those movies, but it's not real life. And I still don't know if like, real life makes good movies, but I wanted to do a movie where the growth is slow and arduous, and at the end, your perspective has only shifted slightly. You've grown a half inch, after all this, and then you continue to grow, and it's still arduous and slow. And
well, it's funny that you're getting into this, because like I know just personally, I'm now getting to a point in my life where I'm realizing how long life actually is.
Right.
And so it is slow.
Yeah.
And we can have lofty goals and lofty dreams,
Yeah.
and we want them all now. We want them immediate. We're even worse about it now than we used to be, I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe it just feels that way because I'm in this moment.
Right. No, but we live in such a society where, like we were talking about last night, like Amazon.
Yeah.
I want it now.
Yeah.
In LA, I have 2-hour Prime. Like we can get a hard drive.
Have 2-hour Prime?
Yeah.
That's not even fair.
Yeah. We can get a hard drive at the house in an hour. Like it's crazy. It's crazy, or like essential lemon oil. It's pretty insane.
Who needs that in 2 hours, really?
Yeah, there's times when you do.
So then tell me, writing has been great, and you've shared some of your writing with me that you haven't been able to finish up yet. But take me to the directing side, because that's also another storytelling aspect of conveying a message and being able to share that. And I think it's another part of your brain. I mean, I guess that's what I find truly interesting about your career is that you have, and from listening to you today very specifically, there's just been moments in your life journey where you felt like you had to make a transition because there was another part of yourself that needed to to pull out of the box. And that you've had these, from what I'm hearing now, kind of these broad shifts and just kind of understanding of what life's about for yourself.
Right.
So what was the transition to kind of finally getting behind the camera and telling a story with that?
I think because the first script I wrote, and it was so personal, and I did want to make a Southern film. Like Tender Mercies is one of my favorite films, and I wanted to make a Southern film that wasn't, full of the stereotypes and the caricatures, and so I worked, and it's hard to do because we do have, it's easy to go to those funny sayings that people have, and those rich characters that we all know that are bigger than life, and you think of like Steel Magnolias, and those people exist, but that wasn't the film I was trying to make, and so, and I was listening to a lot of specific music when I was writing it, and when I was writing it, I was picturing the actors who were going to play it, and I was originally thinking I would play Lucy if we ever got the money. Yeah, like it wasn't even. And then, the locations I wanted to shoot in Arkansas. There were the locations I wanted, and when I did finish it, my agent was like, this is pretty good. I think we could get this made. We started talking directors, and I was talking like Bruce Beresford or someone, and Mike Nichols, and they was like, no, that's not going to happen, And it was at the time when commercials had taken on a whole new level, and so there were the cool hip commercial directors that were trying to get into film.
That was like 2004, 2005 at time.
Yeah,
because the movie came out in 2007.
2006.
2006.
It may have come out. So it was at Sundance in 2006. And then, and so then it just kind of became like, I just knew that like if I couldn't get a director that I really loved, that I trusted, that I knew would handle the material delicately, I would have to do it. And so there was a brief period where I thought I would do both. And I had been fortunate enough to work with Rick Linklater, who's a writer-director, and Kevin Smith. And and those are people like me in some degree. Like Kevin's from the small town in New Jersey, and he went and he just did it. And once you know those people, and Rick's, just this kid from Austin who made this film Slacker. And
Kevin was, from what I've heard, relatively inspired by Linklater a lot.
Yeah. And so early on, I got to work with those people, and Rick especially was very kind of like, write something, we'll shoot it. He instilled that in all of us. Like he encouraged us to improv, to write scenes, and we would come to set and say, we wrote a scene. He'd say, let me see it. And if he liked it, he'd shoot it. So I had that, and I had seen like, okay, those guys can do it. They had good producers, so I knew. I got one of my best friends that I had worked with on a film who was a producer to produce it. So I knew I have my producer, and I will surround myself with good people. And I realized at a certain point, like, I didn't know enough about directing to act and direct it. I knew one would suffer if I did both. And I actually loved, like, being on set first thing in the morning and not worrying about hair or makeup or wardrobe or did I spill something on my shirt or, being able to get kind of down and dirty.
You began to get an appreciation of the other side.
Yeah. It was really nice. And just, and then it is just that like, and I also told myself like the worst directors I've worked with are the ones who think they know everything. And and usually it's because they don't know everything and they're insecure. So they want to act like they do. And I just knew I don't want to be that. I won't be afraid to say I don't know, and surround myself with good people who do know, so that I can.
That's
turn
also
to them.
very empowering, I think. Right? I mean, it's
it's like again, like why would it's my first time directing? And I didn't go to film school, so I hadn't had that. I'd been on sets enough, and I'd read enough scripts, and I knew what a Teamster was, and I knew like you got to be nice to the Teamsters or they'll park your trailers a mile away. Like I knew that stuff, that they don't teach in film school, and and just like how time is completely different on a film set, and like the first half of the day versus the second half, and the time just moves differently. And so I knew, I knew things that a lot of people coming out of film school wouldn't know, and then there's things. They knew that I didn't. And again, I got Tim Orr, who I loved, and spent a lot of time with him, and was able to shot list the movie and really come up with like we were very kind of like after going through the script realized the big scene where Lucy has with her dad there's no dialogue. And so it's like, how do you...
going back to your original problem.
Yeah, and it's like, how do you make that impactful? And so we made a choice to not move the camera until that scene, really. And so it's very sort of one-on-one filmmaking, but that was a deliberate choice, so that when you got to that scene, the cameras move. And, subconsciously, hopefully you feel that. But there were lots of times I just turned to Tim and said... do what you think, or that scene in Raising Victor Vargas. That's, because obviously you can have all the plans in the world and the shot list, but things change. And so I was able, I knew his work really well. I just love his work. And so I was able to say this scene and that's what I want it to feel like. And I think people respect you for that.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think that, why should you know it all? Yeah,
and it's like, I think Tim's super talented. I want his...
Why would you ask for him to be a part of the crew?
Exactly, and then just tell him what to do. Like, I want him to tell me. I want him to argue with me. I want him to have an opinion. I want my wardrobe people to have an opinion. Because they're thinking about it. I mean, I think, ideally the director, yes, is the final say. And there were certain moments where it's like, no, Cal's shoes are brown. Don't, you know what I mean? I can't change, they're brown, trust me.
Was it, how was it working on something that you were so closely tied to from a familial piece, something that
Right.
was coming kind of so close to home that you had grown up with?
It was great. I mean, I highly suggest it for your first film.
It was
You know what I
cathartic
mean?
and
Because
love,
it's like, when they were saying, like, what does this bar look like? Or location. Like, we were, I insisted on shooting in Arkansas, and they didn't have great tax incentives then. Like, people were like, go shoot it in Louisiana. You can shoot this movie in Louisiana. But I knew that, like, if a location fell out, I knew another bar that we could go and find that would feel like I wanted it to feel. So, the hardest part about being director is just that you have, like, all day long, it's just people coming to you saying, what color's Cal's bell? What color's the car? What color are the walls? What question after question. And I knew that world so well, I didn't have to think about it. It wasn't like it. At one point, I would love to try and direct someone else's script. I don't have the confidence right now to do that.
Need another one under your belt, maybe?
I think, or maybe I'll never be that kind of director. Like, I think maybe there's just different directors that are really great at taking someone's written work and really transforming it to another level. That's a talent in and of itself.
Or a co-collaborator, maybe?
Yeah. But, when I write something, I spend so much time with it. And I'm not a fast writer. So I spend so much time with it. And so it's just like, once I get there, I know exactly, how to answer these questions.
And then you don't have to answer this, but is there any, can you tell us anything about what you're working on right now?
Yeah, it's somewhat based on my grandfather, and I just always found this story interesting because he and I clashed growing up. He was super, super conservative, and I have an older brother and sister, and again, like, he would just single me out, and it was cruel almost, and I could never figure out why. I actually found a letter recently that I wrote him because he had a big belly, and I would tell everyone he had ping pong balls in his stomach.
Oh, gosh.
And he found out.
Oh,
and I
no.
wrote this letter that said, I'm sorry, I told people you have ping pong balls in your stomach. But there was just this conflict that, like, again, when you're 3, you don't understand it. Like, your grandparents are supposed to be. And then later I learned that he had been raised under a vaudeville theater in Texarkana, Arkansas. And his mom did wardrobe for the vaudeville players, and his father, like, ran the projector. And so he grew up in this world of artists and longed to be normal. And
So his normal was not what he was seeing outside of the world?
yeah, like, he would go to school and they would be like, you live under the theater? Like, you know what I mean? And then I'm sure the actors would stay and party and, late and just a very transient sort of community.
And he grew up in Arkansas as well?
He did, yeah. And so he rebelled and he became super conservative. And again, like, once you realize the truth, back to that, like, and are an adult and can kind of understand, like, of course he hated me. Like, I was artistic and I was that, my aunt had the same problem with him, his
You were
daughter.
rebelling against the things that, or he
He just sensed
he saw
it.
that, yeah.
He just sensed it, and he just had
What he
the
rebelled
thing.
against what you were becoming.
Yeah, and and wasn't super supportive of when I wanted to go act. And, like, his daughter, my aunt, left at 15 because of, I think, that issue, and was because she was artistic, and she went and studied ballet in Tulsa at a school. Like, she couldn't get away fast enough. But then once you look and you realize, like, of course he's like that, and later in life, like, once, I talked about him on Letterman, I think, or Leno, one of them. He was excited, and I had to, I guess, become what a success, like, and maybe he knew that lifestyle was hard. He knew, maybe he saw his parents struggle,
Trying to
and
protect
so
you from it.
exactly, in his own way. So that story always fascinated me, and then I went and saw Cabaret. They were screening it in LA, and I was just like, oh, I love that movie. And somehow those two stories merged, and I came up with the idea of and also when I first started acting, I had a TV show was my first job, and And a friend came over one day, and I had like a stack of fan mail. I guess my agent had sent to my house, and there was one.
Hopefully pre-screened.
Yeah, hopefully. But there was one that the envelope was colored orange, like a magic marker, and like, please open me, and da-da-da. And so, of course, I opened it first, and it was just the sweetest letter ever. It was so earnest. And, and I always struggled with, like, this sort of, I don't know, being from Arkansas, and I've never been one of those, like, crazy artists. Like, I'm so artistic, I can't pay my bills. Like, I have a very responsible side as well. And I always struggled with, am I crazy? Am I not? Like, I remember I called my mom once. I was doing a film in Toronto, and, like, some of the cast were these just crazy people. And I was like, am I that? And I called my mom, and I was like, am I crazy? Am I normal? Like, it's always been this, I don't know, for me, this kind of, I still don't know. Or there's some parts of me that are and aren't. But at the time, like, I was in this, this kind of crazy, I was finally acting, and there are crazy actors. There are, there's some outrageous behavior.
There are, but isn't there that, isn't that in all professions in some regard?
No, I really think that acting...
You think that there's something unique about that?
I do. I think there's a certain Peter Pan aspect to it where you don't have to grow up. Because as an actor, like, people bring you shit, and you see people kind of lose touch with reality because they're too famous to go to the grocery store. Like, they just can't. But once you stop going to the grocery store and stop going to the dry cleaners and stop doing these things, and you're not paying, like, because at the time then I had, like, an accountant, because when you're traveling, you couldn't pay bills online. So you had to have an accountant who just handled your money. So I never touched it or saw it, or, you know what I mean? I never had to write that check to my landlord. And so you just lose touch with reality. And there's certain behavior that's allowed in the film world that I don't think would be allowed in an office setting.
Sure.
I've had actors come in and show me their genitals, and it's just like, it's just, and people are catering to you, and can we get you a coffee, and and you're encouraged to look young and act young and be young and play younger than you are. I was 25 playing 18. So it's just a different thing, and so I've struggled with that, and at the time I just sort of, I'd been in LA long enough, and, like, met the sleazy guys and the sleazy people and dated the crazy guys, and it is different than growing up in Arkansas.
Sure.
And so there was always a part of me that longed for just that normal guy, and I got this letter, and it was so sweet, and, like, I play football, and I imagine you on the sidelines cheering me on, and I just wanted you to know that I really love your show, and it was just so sweet and normal, and it was from, like, a John Smith Jr.
Yeah.
In whatever town.
Yeah.
So I called Information, which still existed, and asked for John Smith Sr. And got a phone number, and called this kid, and he got on the phone, and I was like, "It's Joey," and I just wanted to call and say I got your letter, and he was like, and I was like,
No.
So you play football? No. Even though he had said he did. And I was like, wait, so you're watching the show? And he was like, And I was like, well, it's nice to talk to you, thanks for watching the show. I'm glad you're a fan. Yeah. And then I hung up, and then I just felt so bad for the kid, because I knew, like, he can't go tell his friends that, because he did say, he goes, I know this is you, I know your voice. And he couldn't go and tell his friends that, like, Joey just called him, and he just blew the phone conversation.
Yeah.
And there was no, like, caller ID, or, like, he couldn't call me back and be like, I fucked that up. I was like, I didn't expect the call.
Yeah.
And so he's had to live with that of, I just blew.
That's very funny. Well, and it's the exact opposite. Like, I've heard a lot of people tell the story of like having some sort of interaction with someone that they admire right on the other side of it, where they've made a approach. In fact, Terry, our CEO and chairman, tells a funny story about when he, because he had an amazing career. He ran Marvel for a while. He ran the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame Museum. And so he had all these amazing interactions with stars, one-on-one personal interactions, and kind of his childhood hero was on a stage. And so he decided he was going to go give him a moment. He was going to go give him a moment and just tell him what an inspiration in his life had been. He had prepared all this stuff he was going to say to him, and he delivered exactly what he wanted. And he said, he leaned over and he said, do you know if they're going to have lunch soon?
Yeah. I had that with Johnny Cash.
Did you? Really?
Yeah, and I had like everything I was going to say, and and I'm from Arkansas, and because I used to sleep with his 8-track when I was like 6, like 5, I would bawl when he came on the TV, and I finally got to meet him, and like I knew I was going to meet him, and I had an 8x10, and I think he's the only person I've ever asked for their autograph, and he like I felt him walk into the room, and then like finally we got to meet, and he was like, I'm Johnny. And he's like, where are you from? And I was like, Arkansas. And I started crying, and it was just awful. It was so awful. But anyway, so after I hung up, with this kid, my mind just started going, and it was like, what if I showed up there? Like, what if I just got on a plane and showed up there? What would happen? Like, does he have a girlfriend? And how would he deal with that if he did? But if I were truly a crazy actress and believed this letter and went and was like, okay, I'm here and I want to be together,
what happens?
Yeah, what now? Yeah. And so and this was back when I was 22. So this story's been kicking around in my head. And then when I saw Cabaret, like my grandfather, that letter, Cabaret, it just kind of all came together. So it's a story about a crazy actress who gets a fan letter and shows up, and the kid's living in this theater, and he's humiliated that he's living in this theater. And
well, I appreciate you letting me read it. And it was a lot of fun, and I hope it. And I know that you're trying to figure out what it is and how it becomes, and all those pieces and parts, and it could change immensely between now and whatever Inception ends up in. But I know that the sense that I got from it, I think the kind of the funness that I read into it is it reminded me a lot of the independent films that I loved watching,
right.
In the 90s and early 2000s, some of which you're in, but a lot of which you're not. But that sensation, that feeling you got of kind of a freedom of expression and a freedom to be playful on the screen and take some chances, but also share a slice of a very unique piece of life that felt earnest, and felt like it was possible.
Well, and it's kind of like, and maybe this is a good sort of like bookend, but it takes you back to like when I first sat down and like me coming here and like you know what I mean? Like I still feel like this girl from Arkansas, but like what is fame? What is it really? And especially nowadays that there's people who are famous on YouTube and they have more Facebook likes than I do and like all of this crazy stuff, but it's like, at the end of the day, it always has to come back to like, are you doing what you love to do? And why, are you doing it for the fame? Are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And so I wanted to have an actress who had lost touch with reality, who is so famous, and then come meet these kids who are performing just because they have to perform, because they would die if they can't. And her seeing that, like she's lost what it is to have a dream. And I think that it's really important to like, because like I dreamed of becoming, moving to LA and being an actress. And if that didn't work out, I was going to be a joy designer and get that Italy job. But
you always had the backup plan.
Yeah. But but it's like then you reach that, and I think it's really important to continue to dream. And so I feel like Kaylee, the lead girl, reached her dream at a young age and won the Academy Award and never came up with another dream. And I think if you don't constantly have a dream going, again, you can get destructive in idle hands. And like it's always important to be dreaming and having new dreams and achieving one, because what you'll realize is when you achieve that dream, it's not everything, it doesn't make you, and I live happily ever after.
Right, no, because you have something else you want to do.
Yeah, and it's just like acting didn't do everything. It didn't make me secure and make all those people who made fun of me in Arkansas when I was, it doesn't do kind of all those things that you think it's going to do. It doesn't fulfill you in a way. Nothing does. Like, you have to find that in yourself. But it's fun to do and have, but it's like the meaning of it is different for me now. And so the reasons why I do things and have different dreams, are different than when I was younger.
Well, I can't wait to see what becomes of it. It's very exciting.
Thank you.
And I asked for 30 minutes, and you gave me almost an hour, so I appreciate
nice.
it.
Has it been an hour?
Yeah, it's been close.
God.
So
Wow.
I really
Okay.
appreciate you spending some time.
Absolutely.
And it's been a great conversation.
It's been great, yeah.
So now we need to
Head
get
over
off to the award ceremony.
Yes, let's go.
So, great. Thanks so
thank
much.
you. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Would you be interested in some weekly inspirations and insights into this wildly weird and mystical world of creatives I dive into onto a regular basis? I send out a short email every week for your Sunday evening reading pleasure. This short email includes strange interviews I come across, articles I discover while researching podcast guests, and tools and tricks I discover in my own creative process, and much, much more. Let me tickle your cerebrum with a fun read to start off your week. Just visit barrow.blog/inspire. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Creatively.